Hey guys, it's Samantha, Scarlette, and today I'm going to be doing a true crime story for you guys. And if you like this, I'll do more true crime. The first story I'm doing is the Los Feliz Murder Mansion, which is a case I've been kind of obsessed with. Not so much of late, but I was really obsessed with this a couple years ago, but I've been obsessed with this since like 2011, so almost a decade. I first heard about the Los Feliz Murder Mansion after watching American Horror Story, the first one, Murder House, which in my opinion is the best American Horror Story. After watching that, I was curious, is there an actual house in Los Angeles that is haunted, that had a murder, blah, 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 is there not a real house that this show is based off of? So I did some research, and sure enough, there is, and it's the Los Feliz Murder House. Obviously, the show drew inspiration from a slew of various things, but this has also been, the Los Feliz Murder House has been cited as one of the things that inspired the show. So that was 2011, and I read more about it, and I became obsessed, and you guys are gonna, if you've never heard of this story, you're gonna find out why in a second, because it was like, it was such a mystery, and the mystery actually is still ongoing, but for a while there it was kind of like, okay, it's solved, but no, there's still a lot of bizarre shit surrounding this house. So I'm just giving my little background on it. And so I'm going to say that most of my information in this video, I've actually had like a folder on my computer that had like, I had like all my ticking points and all of my, like from years ago, all of my compiled research comes from, there's a thread on findadeath.com, which if you have the time to sift through it, it's a really long thread that's been going on for like over 10 years. Go through it, the Find a Death thread, which I believe is listed, it's not listed as the Los Feliz Murder House, it's listed as the Perelson Murders because it was Dr. Harold Perelson that committed the murder. Look through that thread because it is insane and there's a lot of really good pictures there. And then I read a ton of articles, like blog posts over the years about the house. I remember there was one of them, which I have information in here from that, where the person actually had gained access to the coroner's records, which gave a lot more insight to what actually happened. So those are my sources. I like literally, I don't have like all the links to give you because this is just from like years and years of reading all sorts of stuff on the case. So to get into it, let's go. Okay, so for over 50 years, which, and now, I mean, this happened in 1950, actually, it happened in 1959 in December. So actually for over now 60 years, it's been 60 years since the murder. The Los Feliz Murder House has been shrouded in mystery. And the reason why it's been shrouded in mystery is because after the murders, this house, which in today's society, in today's current economy, even in disrepair, is worth over $3 million. This $3 million plus mansion in Los Feliz, which is one of the most desirable and expensive neighborhoods in Los Angeles. I actually had the opportunity to go see the outside of this house about 2 months ago in October of 2019. And this house has a city view, okay? Which in LA, for a lot with a city view, you sometimes pay over $1 million, let alone a house with a city view. And this house has sat empty for over 50 years. So we're gonna get into the whole story. And it involves allegedly a Christmas tree from 50 or 60 now years ago, and a lot of weird stuff. So we're gonna get into the history of the house first. The house, which sits at 2475 Glendower Place in Los Angeles, California, is a Spanish Revival mansion that was built in 1925 by architect Harry F. Schumacher, it was signed by architect Harry E. Wiener for Harry F. Schumacher. The 3-story Spanish-style mansion is complete with a 3rd floor ballroom. I believe it also sports 4 or 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. The house in the 1920s was lived in by famed silent film director from Germany, Fred Zelnick, and his actress wife. In 1931, there's alleged that the Beaton family was living in the house, Wilford Beaton was a film critic in Los Angeles, and that his 20-year-old son, Donald Beaton, died in his bed from an infection he contracted playing tennis. So this might have been the first death in the house, but that evidence, people aren't really sure if that's correct, because there's also thought that it might have actually happened at 2457 Glendower and not 2475. So there's some discrepancies on whether the address is in fact the house to the murder house or not. So, but there's a potentiality that a 20-year-old died in the house from natural causes in 1931, in May 3rd, 1931. Harry Schumacher, who was the original owner of the house, he died in 1932, which, if the Beaton family never lived in, with the whole address thing, it's possible that Harry Schumacher could have died in the house as well. However, there's no listing of where he died. The house was auctioned December 6, 1932 by a bank. So presentably, it sounds like Harry Schumacher probably did own the house when he passed away in 1932, and then his estate or whoever that inherited it couldn't afford it, and that's why it went to a bank in December 6th of 1932, which ironically is the same date in 1959 as the murders. So that right there is very interesting. I'm just looking over my notes because I haven't actually looked over these in years. That's really interesting. So the Los Feliz Murder House at 2475 Glendower Place, it sits directly below the Ennis House. The Ennis House is a iconic Frank Lloyd Wright house in Los Angeles that you probably have seen before. The Ennis House was the exterior for the original 1959, the same year as the murders, House on Haunted Hill, in the movie, the famous horror movie, the original one, not the 90s or early 2000s shitty remake, but the original House on Haunted Hill. In this house was also used as Drusilla and Spike's lair on the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and more recently the band 30 Seconds to Mars, Jared Leto, they recorded parts of their album, their critically acclaimed album, This Is War, which, wow, time flies, because I keep thinking that's like a recent album, but it's actually from 10 years ago, 2009. But This Is War for 30 Seconds to Mars, certain songs off that album were recorded in the Ennis House. So literally you have this really famous Frank Lloyd Wright house, and then they're directly, the murder house is directly below the Frank Lloyd Wright house. So both houses are really cool, actually. Another interesting tidbit in Los Feliz, there's a house built by Lloyd Wright, who is Frank Lloyd Wright's son, called the Soden House. And that house is the house that's thought to be the location that the Black Dahlia was murdered at. So interesting, gruesome tie-ins. So now we're gonna get into the Perelsons. This is the family that the 1959 murder happened to. Dr. Harold Perelson was originally from New York City. He married Lillian Silver sometime in the late 30s or early 40s, and he was a cardiology professor at USC School of Medicine. And USC in California is a really good school. I would say for the West Coast, USC, UCLA, Berkeley, those are like the West Coast version of like Harvard or Yale, or NYU. So being a cardiology professor at USC would be a very big deal. I mean, it still is. The Perelsons had 3 children, Judy, Debbie, and Joel. They bought the mansion at 2475 Glendower Place for $60,000 in the early 1950s, which $60,000 in the 1950s would be like buying a probably like $1.5 to $2 million house today, or maybe more, because the actual house, which, as I said earlier, is in disrepair, is currently worth over $3 million. In 1938, Dr. Perelson patented a medical device, a syringe that took medication out of the bottle, basically the way that syringes, if you've ever had a vaccination, how they put the syringe in the bottle and the stopper, and they take it out without getting air into it today. Back in the 1930s, that was not a thing, and Dr. Harold Perelson actually invented a device. I'm not sure if it's the actual device that we use today, but he invented a device to do the syringes, and he invested his own money into it. In fact, it seems that he invested over $100,000, which once again, that would be like millions in today's society, into this device. And he had a partner named Edward Shostak. Edward Shostak screwed him over, and he took him to court for $100,000. And after 2 years of litigation, Dr. Perelson only got $24,000. So that was the thing that started off him going into financial debt. So in 1957, and they, over the years, they were having a lot of financial trouble. I guess, honestly, because I'm reading my notes, I'm comparing other things I've read. Honestly, this doesn't make sense that that's necessarily the catalyst, because 1938, after they still bought this mansion, unless he was one of these people in today's society, 30K millionaires, and this is the reason we had the 2008 financial bubble burst where everyone foreclosed, is because a lot of people buy homes that they can't afford. So I'm kind of trying to figure out, did he bounce back from the whole fiasco with the syringe, or was he just overextending himself? I don't know. We'll probably never know. But in 1957, the Perelson's daughter, Judy, who was the oldest daughter, she was in high school. She got into a car accident with her 2 younger siblings. All of the kids suffered injuries, including head trauma, and I'm assuming had to be hospitalized, which we know back in the 50s, you didn't have health insurance. People had to pay out of pocket, so that would cost a pretty penny. And to make matters worse, the person that Judy hit the car of, they sued for $30,000 and won. And once again, $30,000 in the 1950s would be probably being sued for $250,000 to $500,000 in today's money. So that's gonna really set you back. In the years leading up to the murders, the Perelson family were in financial trouble, as we've already established. So then we get to the murders. It was around 4:30 a.m. on December 6th, like I said before, the date that the house foreclosed in 1932, December 6th, 1959, and Lillian Perelson and the 3 Perelson children were fast asleep. Harold stood over his wife in her bed, striking the back of her head with a pinball hammer as she lay sleeping, leaving a several-inch wide hole. Think about that, hole to the back of her head. He walked through the shared bathroom to his eldest daughter Judy's bedroom and struck her with the hammer. For some reason, he did not hit her in an area that would have killed her. Instead, he woke her up. She screamed so loudly that neighbors across the street were woken up, which I can't even imagine how, having been to this house, how loud she would have had to scream, because the house is up a hill. There's a sprawling front yard, and the nearest house would be is down the hill from them. So, I guess sound travels, but that would be, I can't even imagine. Judy was able to fight back. She fought off Dr. Perelson, and she somehow escaped. She ran through her parents' bedroom. She saw her mother dead in bed, which must have been a horrific scene, and she ran down the stairs, out the front door, down the lawn to the neighbor's house, screaming, "Don't kill me." She banged frantically on the neighbor's doors until her neighbor, Marshall Ross, finally let her into his house, and they called the police together. Back inside the 2475 Glendower Place, her 2 younger siblings, 11-year-old Debbie and 13-year-old Joel, woke up. Their father, Dr. Perelson, told them, "Go back to bed. This is a nightmare." Marshall Ross, after calling the police, rushed up to the house. I have to say, Marshall Ross is a really good guy, because if my next door neighbor came over saying that her dad had killed their mom and tried to kill her with a hammer, my reaction would not be to run over there. My reaction would be wait for the police. Anyway, so after calling the police, he rushed up to the house. He found Debbie and Joel waiting scared on the first floor. When he climbed up the stairs, he found Dr. Perelson dripping with blood. Harold Perelson told Marshall Ross, "Go home, don't bother me." Okay, you killed your wife. Go home, don't bother me. Ross watched Dr. Perelson walk into the bathroom. In the bathroom, Dr. Perelson went into his medicine drawer, smearing blood all over the bathroom. He then drowned 2 capsules of Nebutol. So this is the stuff that actually comes from the actual coroner's report, because I know I've seen a couple of videos on this and nobody mentions this. This stuff was actually in the coroner's report of what he had, because there's speculation that he took poison. No, he actually took pills. So anyway, he downed 2 capsules of Nebutol, a powerful barbiturate that is actually the same barbiturate that killed Judy Garland. To make sure his OD would be fatal, Dr. Perelson also swallowed 31 white pills, which were thought to be codeine. The doctor then went into his daughter Judy's room, and lay down on her bed. The police arrived 15 minutes later. At 5:15, the police discovered the doctor now on the floor with his head on a pillow that had his daughter Judy's blood on it. He was still breathing when the police arrived, but he was dead before the ambulance came. On the nightstand next to Perelson's bed, the police found a copy of Dante's The Divine Comedy, the play about the devil, the Inferno, opened to the page Canto 1, which reads, "Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest, for the straightforward path had been lost. So bitter it is, death is little more. But of the good to treat, which there I found, speak will I of the other things I saw there. I cannot well repeat how there I entered. So full was I of slumber at the moment in which I had abandoned the true way." After the deaths, it was found out that Dr. Perelson had actually previously been hospitalized several times for suicide attempts, which, judging by what happened, it's kind of unfortunate he wasn't successful in his earlier attempts. And the family covered these suicide attempts up by telling friends and whatever that he was having coronary episodes. So yeah, he tried to kill himself. Let's blame it on heart problems. It was also found in the coroner's report that Lillian Perelson wasn't killed by the initial blows to her head that left a gaping several-inch wound in her skull. Instead, she actually died of asphyxiation, drowning in her own blood. Her eyeballs actually filled up with blood from the trauma. It's pretty horrific and gruesome. Following the murders, the 2 youngest children then went on to live with Lillian's family. Judy was 18, so presumably she went to college, so that's unknown. Some people in I think it was the Find a Death forum, actually did some research, and they found Lillian's Facebook, and I think that's messed up. This woman clearly doesn't want to be reliving this stuff. She hasn't ever spoken publicly. She wants to be disassociated from it. I think personally Judy should be left alone. I did click the links, and it looks like she's doing well in her life, so I think, and she would be in her, I believe, she's probably in her 80s now, so I mean, leave this woman alone. That's my thought on it. Anyway, so that's the murders. The murders to me aren't really the interesting part of it, though. The interesting part is what happened following the murders, and this is where the mystery is, because I mean, obviously the murders pretty straightforward. They were having financial problems, and Dr. Harold Perelson felt that he was better off killing himself, his wife, and the family instead of dealing with it. He just didn't want to be poor. He didn't want to lose the house. So that's not that, it's very unfortunate, but it's not that much of a mystery. The mystery is what comes next. So after the murders, everything gets creepier and everything gets really strange. So a year later, in 1960, the mansion went up for auction. It was purchased by a Hispanic couple, Julian and Emily Enriquez, but the Enriquez family never moved in. There are 2 main stories of what became of the home after the murder, and version 1 is the Enriquez family purchased the home at the auction with the Perelsons' belongings in it, but never lived in the home, leaving the home completely untouched for all of this time, with their furnishings as they left them on the night of the murder, including a Christmas tree with presents still under them. Now, some people have claimed to have seen this Christmas tree, but when the house was later emptied, which we'll get to towards the end of this video, there was no Christmas tree that was found. However, there were, in fact, unwrapped or partially wrapped Christmas presents, which is really bizarre. Version 2, which I actually kind of believe a bit more is that supposedly people spoke to neighbors who lived there at the time of the murders, and they backed this up. However, that's completely internet conjecture. So, you know, somebody on a forum, it wasn't like it was in one of the LA Times articles. So can't 100% know this, but this version makes a bit more sense, judging by the fact that the Perelsons are Jewish. I mean, I do have a lot of Jewish friends that celebrate Christmas, but in the 1960s or 50s, I don't know how many Jews actually celebrated Christmas, if it was as common as it is today. So, because it would be weird that the Perelson family had Christmas presents, if they were Jewish, which they were definitely Jewish. Version 2 is that another family moved into the house after the murders. The name of the family has never been known, if this in fact happened. It's possible that the Enriquez family did briefly move in, but that's more unlikely. The son, Rudy Enriquez, claimed that no, they never lived in the house. So it's more likely that it was a renter if this happened, and that the family lived there a very short while, but fled in December, leaving all of their belongings behind. And that the items in the home weren't actually the Perelson's items, and they were in fact the family that moved in after. And if they fled in December, it sounds like they fled on the anniversary, or around the anniversary of the murders, as the murders happened December 6, 1959. Now, when I kind of believe this version a little bit more. It's like, why did they flee? And it makes me think of another case that happened a lot closer to where I live here in New York. It happened about an hour away by train in Amityville, Long Island. We all know the whole story of the Amityville horror. The DeFeo family were killed by their oldest son on November 13th, 1974. A year later, the Lutz family moved in. And that is true. Okay, the movies are, I don't know that I believe the stuff in the movies, but the facts are that there was the murder in Amityville, and then a year later, the Lutz family moves in, and then they claimed, I don't know what I believe on this, that they experienced hauntings and demonic stuff, and they fled the house, leaving all of their belongings behind on the anniversary of the murder. So it makes you wonder, honestly, if this whole thing, if the version 2 of the murder house is true, if somehow the Lutz family, because I have to do more research into it, but my feelings have always been on the Amityville horror that the Lutz family were con artists. If they maybe had heard about this house in California. But moving forward, that's just my conjecture. So over the years, people have gone up to this house because it was empty for over 50 years. People would go and they'd break into the house. I think I probably have more stuff on here about that. And people would peer through the windows. People took photos through the windows, and people saw things like furnishings from the 1950s. 1950s TVs, 1950s board games, Christmas presents partially wrapped and wrapping paper. And I'm sorry, even if, because the Enriquez family says they use the house for storage, parts of the house. But I'm sorry, if you're using a house for storage for 50 years, why do you have wrapped Christmas presents that have never been opened or given? That's what gives credence that somebody fled that house, either if it's that it's left undisturbed from the night of the murders, or this other family that allegedly moved in after. I don't understand why you'd have Christmas presents that were never wrapped or unwrapped. And these pictures that I would see when I was following this message board thread, every couple months, somebody would go up to the house, would trespass, and take pictures through the windows, and you would see these things, and it looked like a scene straight out of the 1950s. It was so bizarre. I have here in my notes, no Christmas tree was ever found. So, I mean, people claim that. I think that probably the story of the Christmas tree was sensationalism, that people saw the unwrapped Christmas presents and they're like, oh, there's this Christmas tree from 1959. I don't know. But what we do know is there were for sure, and you can find on Find a Death and other websites, you can find the pictures of the Christmas present. It's so creepy. So the Perelson family, so one of the reasons why I believe, like I said previously, the whole thing that there was this other family that moved in after is, one, the Christmas presents, the Perelsons were Jewish. Two, the biggest reason why I believe that it is in fact that there was a second family and that the belongings are theirs is that people photographed Life magazines that they could see through the windows. And myself and some other people did sleuthing, and we were able to figure out that the issue of Life magazine that was on the tray, or whatever it was actually an issue of Life magazine from May 8th, 1960, which would be from 6 months after the murders. So, I mean, presumably from everything account was that the Perelson children, as soon as their parents died in that house, they moved out. And I can't imagine if both your dad murdered your mom in a house, you're gonna go move back in. So it makes more sense that another family moved in after, and that was their Life magazine. There's also, people photographed SpaghettiOs, which SpaghettiOs didn't, the canned, TV dinner food thing. Do they make SpaghettiOs anymore? I don't know, they're disgusting. But I remember them from the 90s. But anyway, people photographed boxes of SpaghettiOs, and SpaghettiOs were not introduced until 1965. So, however, the SpaghettiOs could have belonged to the Enriquez family. So, regardless of all of that, the house has sat unlived in since at least the 1960s, at least like 1960. The Enriquez couple that purchased the house died in 1994, leaving the house to their son, Rudy, who subsequently died in 2015. So when I originally heard about this case in 2011, Rudy Enriquez still owned this house. And what's really bizarre about this too is, even though he inherited a mansion that's worth several $1 million in a very, very desirable neighborhood of Los Angeles, Rudy opted never to live in or sell the house, even after being approached over the years by potential buyers. From what I could find, Rudy, I think, lived in an apartment somewhere. And that's just bizarre to me. You own this mansion in Los Feliz, and for whatever reason, you refuse to sell it, which you would have made several $1 million and been able to live comfortably off of, and you refuse to live in it. So that's so weird. Over the years, Rudy said that he used the house for storage, and he even kept cats in the house. He kept pet cats there. He would go up to this house, feed cats, but he never lived in the home. He never got married, didn't have kids, so when he died, he left the house to no heir, and the house was inherited by a bank. The bank had the house up for sale, and the house was finally open to the public. And I just want to backtrack too, that over the years, the house was broken into a lot, supposedly, by people that were just interested in the case, like myself. I mean, I never broke in. I didn't even go onto the property when I went back in October. I just stood, my friend and I took pictures of it from the street. I'm not that cray, but people, broke in to try to see what they could see in the house. And also supposedly prostitutes and drug addicts would also break into this house to use it for stuff. So the neighbors were not happy with that, and they actually paid for the neighbors, even though when Rudy was alive, paid for a security system. They put chains over the driveway so people can drive up to it, and they also paid for the upkeep on the front lawn. Because imagine this, you live in a $1 million not and there's the big mansion on the hill, which it is like the focal point of the neighborhood, and it's in disrepair. That, not only is it an eyesore, but it hurts your property value. So anyway, after he died, the bank that inherited it allowed, because in LA, it was to weird people like myself on the internet, it was a well-known thing. So they let people go in and photograph it. And I believe those photos are still online. And once again, no Christmas tree was found, but the items inside the house were very mysterious. It looked like a 1950s or 1960s episode of Hoarders, because there's all this stuff, and it's all stuff from the 1960s. It wasn't Rudy used this place for storage, but you weren't seeing things from the 90s or the 80s or even the 70s, and obviously not the 2000s hoarded in there. It was just things from the 1950s and 1960s. It looked presumably how you would picture it to have looked the night of the murder. So the house and the contents, it's never been that mystery still exists because Rudy died without really explaining it. So to this day, no one knows, and no one probably ever will know unless the Perelson children or the unknown second family's children, who would be pretty old now, steps forward. The house then, after the murders, was cleaned. It was completely cleaned out, and it was put on the market. They did some minor renovations to it, and I believe it was in 2016 or 2017, the house was purchased by Lisa Bloom. You might know her as being a TV, I think she does like true crime and like comments on issues. She's a well-known lawyer who appears on television, and she is the daughter of really famous, well, I mean, she herself is very famous. I believe she represented some of the women that sued Fox News in the whole sexual harassment scandal. I think it was like the Bill O'Reilly scandal. But her mom is Gloria Allred, who is obviously one of the most famous female lawyers ever and one of the most successful. And so Lisa Bloom and her husband, they purchased the murder house, and they were like, oh, we're gonna make it into a home. We don't believe in, you know, the bad whatever juju. Those were not her words, but you know what I'm saying. Like, she was like, oh, we're gonna renovate it and reclaim the house. Well, her and her husband, they partially did. The house was ripped down to the studs on the inside. So like, if you look it up now, all the drywall was ripped out. I believe the house was thought to have had black mold, so yeah, that's very expensive. And the house is now up for sale again. So it is now on the market for over $3 million, a $3 million plus fixer upper. So it's like the saga of this house is never ending, and that leads to, I've never really and I'm into like the whole haunting thing. I've never in-depthly found any definitive stuff that this house is haunted, but on the message boards and stuff, there's conjecture about it where people claim like that when they went there, they got a really bad vibe. Like, I didn't feel anything there, but I didn't go up to the house, and I had literally just been with my friend at the La Bianca house. Some dark tourism that day, which was creepy AF. My friend and I had actually always seen the pictures of the La Bianca house online. I was like, oh, honestly, it doesn't look that bad. It looks like a pretty house, whatever. My friend and I got out of the car in front of there, and we both felt physically ill. And it wasn't like sickness from eating food. We had just eaten at El Coyote, which was the place where Sharon Tate had her last meal. It wasn't physical sickness in my stomach. It was physical sickness like in my chest. I can't describe it. I just wanted to get the F out of there. And then my friend who actually stepped onto the La Bianca driveway, she got so sick that she actually threw up in the street in front of the La Bianca house. And like, I had to look at my GPS to actually go look at the Glendale Place house. I had to pull up the block, and like as soon as we got in front of the next house, I felt fine. So that was just like a little side note, like La Bianca house, talk about bad juju. But anyway, so I didn't feel anything at the Los Feliz Murder House, but a lot of people claim that they actually broke in or went up to the windows, that they had bad vibes. There's some person that got bit by a black widow spider. I mean, I don't know that being bit by a black widow at an abandoned house in LA, that just seems like where black widows would be, that's anything paranormal. But I don't know, like there's people that claim that they've seen Lillian Perelson in the windows, but like I really don't know what the origins of those stories are. But to me, it seems like if there are hauntings and something would be haunted, this house seems like it definitely would be haunted. And I think the craziest part about it was when I went in LA, because I hadn't really looked up the case in a couple years. I thought like, okay, Lisa Bloom bought it, she's renovating it, that's the end of the story, it was cleaned out. But when I went there with my friend, I'm like, I see the for sale sign, I see that the house is still in disrepair. It's like, what the heck? I can't remember. I think we even actually tried to call the real estate agent to look at it, and I don't think they called back, or I don't know. But I might go back to LA in a couple months. If I do, I will try to go on a tour of that house. Like, I'm gonna take one for the team. But yeah, like, I don't know, this case, it still intrigues me because what actually happened? I mean, I think one of the more gripping things to me is this possible, like, kind of like Amityville horror aspect here, that there might have been a family that did move in and they fled. And honestly, like, I don't think Lisa Bloom has made any comment on why she didn't go through with the renovation. I mean, on the I think it was the Find a Death thread, there's some speculation, okay, that she couldn't afford the renovation, but like, she is a TV personality and a lawyer. They make a lot of money. I mean, granted, a renovation on a house like that, I believe it's like over 5,000 square feet. I'm done with my notes. They, you know, it could run $1 million or something. So maybe she ran out of money, or because she actually is asking, I believe, like over a million more than what she paid for the house. But they did rip down drywall, and ripped out all the flooring. So that is very expensive to do. But it makes you wonder, did she run into some ghosts? Did she feel a bad vibe? Like, why did she sell it? Like, why is she selling it? Why didn't she go through with this project? Why does this house still remain empty? Like, the thing that's odd, I mean, it is a really, well, honestly, for LA, for Spanish style, I don't think it's actually that great a house. I think the only reason not to tear it down is because it does have this creepy history, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to live in that house. So I'm honestly shocked that the house hasn't just been torn down for the land, because it's a great lot. Then again, they're asking over $3 million for it, and most people aren't going to pay $3 million for a lot. Even in Los Angeles, that's kind of pricey. But you know, it's just like, and why did Rudy tear the house down? You know, it's kind of strange, because I don't believe it's on the historic registry. So yeah, that is the story of what we know on the Los Feliz Murder Mansion at 2475 Glendower Place, home of the December 6, 1959 Perelson murders. Tell me below what you think about the video, if you want me to do more true crime, what your theory is on this case, if you've looked into it. And again, for resources, there's so many articles online. So like, just Google like Perelson murders or Los Feliz murder house. You're gonna find a lot of stuff. I really believe that the Find a Death thread on it is probably the most definitive source. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Later.